Well, welcome to another session. Uh, Today, I would like to talk about the concept of a Renaissance individual, and in this particular instance, Renaissance man. Now, the word comes from obviously the period of antiquities, but generally was something that was used to designate an individual. In this case, I'm referring to men, a person who was well versed in various parts of life, various areas of gifts, a person with an ability to understand, interact, engage, collaborate, create across several disciplines, disciplines of work, disciplines and interactions of life, and someone who had a profound appetite for the concept of continuous learning. And I thought one of the best things I could perhaps suggest to younger men, those between 18 years and 35 years, is to perhaps have this as a goal, to strive for being a Renaissance person. There is no harm. As a matter of fact, I think it's something to be admired. The reason I thought about this was because over the last few days, I was looking back at some of the people that I acknowledge as being extremely influential, instrumental in my development and in my growth and me as a person. Obviously, beginning with my father, and my mother, and all the respective relatives that played a part in my development. But it goes further than that, because there were other people who played a part in giving me the opportunity to be educated, to be cultured, and some who invested their lives directly or indirectly in my growth and development. But it also included people who I sought after, people who I went to for mentorship, for learning, for guidance, people I wanted to apprentice under. And so as I look back at my life over the last few days, I realized that most of what I know, most of what I have learned over the course of my life could not have been possible without the generous gifts of other people. Now, one of the most important gifts people can give you is time. People invest in their time in you. Correction is a gift. If someone corrects you, it means they have some interest in you. As a matter of fact, I've said, the day the people you believe care about you stop correcting you, that should be a cause for concern, because it indicates that they've perhaps decided to let you be. And as I looked at my life over the past many years, I realized that I had obviously dabbled in so many areas of life, and I tried so many things. And one of the things that came to mind was the fact that most of that desire was not inborn. It was a cultivated thirst, a cultivated desire. I believe in the prior session I talked about men and the fact that some of our needs, some of our desires, some of our appetites are either the ones we are born with, the ones that are seasonal and go through cycles, and the ones that are cultivated, developed, and those that are nurtured. And I realized that I have an interest in multiple areas of life, but that interest was something that was given to me by inspiration, by motivation, by being at awe at people. people I admired. And these people were really Renaissance people who were very, very gifted in the area of life, and therefore they shared their wisdom. And so what I'd like in the few minutes I have with you today is to encourage you to think about having a goal of becoming a polymath in life. What we tend to find today is that most people are skilled in one area of life. And because they are so skilled in one area, they look no further outside the area of interest. Being a professional and being skilled, being proficient, being a master or attaining mastery in an area is very, very important. But in today's day and age, especially from a social setting perspective, having an appetite for most parts of life, having an interest and an insatiable appetite for learning, a passion for reading, is something that is in short supply. Now, let me start by saying that I think, and this is a personal perspective, the internet has done so much to advance humankind. Within the area of personal development, we have an abundance of information, knowledge, but unfortunately, we have almost what I would call a famine, a scarcity of people who have been taught how to think. And one of the reasons has to do with the fact that we've become unable to retain our focus and our attention. The introduction of podcasts and short clips in YouTube and short videos, I think personally, has done more harm to people's learning. Now, we've learned in other ways. We know how to listen and understand, but we do not know how to read and comprehend. And so, let me begin today's session by talking about 3 specific pillars of what I think you need as part of you trying to aspire towards being a Renaissance person, being a person who has the ability to walk into a room and engage, converse and communicate with people across different walks of life without necessarily experiencing their struggles, but knowing what their struggles are, the history of their struggles, and what their aspirations could be, and recognizing and being able to contend with all of the various colors that people have as part of their canvas of life. The first has to do with your intellect. To be a Renaissance person, to be a Renaissance man, it begins with your intellect. It begins with your mind. Every single person, we all live in 3 levels of understanding, 3 levels of our personality. We are spiritual beings. We live in a physical body. We've been gifted with an intellect or a mind. Our intellect, unfortunately, is the one part that we do not pay enough attention to in terms of development. The spirit is just what it is. Like energy, the spirit just is. There is very little you can do to optimize, improve your spirit. There are things you can do to create the environment where your spiritual gifts flourish. But generally speaking, spirit just is. The mind is where we can have improvements, because the mind is like a power. It needs direction, it needs focus, it needs harnessing, it needs creativity, it needs destination. The body we are familiar with, and the body is one that we use every single day. To be a Renaissance person, you have to understand the power of your intellect, the power of your mind. Now, we have intellectual faculties: imagination, perspective or perception, your memory, focus. All of these are parts of your intellectual faculties. And with your intellectual faculties and how you use those faculties, you create emotions. Those emotions are expressed. Your feelings are internally felt. Your mind and your imagination is the most powerful gift that you have. With that, you can build castles, you can build ideas and concepts, and you can write poems, and you can make poetry. You can do anything you want in your mind, with your mind, and through your mind. And so the first part of the Renaissance journey is to have an appreciation for the awesome power you have in your intellect and in your mind. And I would say there are 4 parts to this. Over the course of my life, obviously I have made so many mistakes. And as I look back, I thought, okay, what could I have done differently? I learned something from Brian Tracy many years ago, in which he talked about an important mental process, a construct to use to enhance or improve the quality of your outputs in your life. He said, in everything you do, there's an importance for you to stop and review your actions. And as part of that review process, you begin with some questions. What am I doing? Or what have I done? What could I have done differently? And what did I do well? And if you can understand and identify what you could have done differently, that is where self-improvement begins, because you don't learn much from success. You learn more from failure. And I found that looking at my life and my past, there were things that I would have improved. I would have loved to have improved. And so let me explain this 4 areas of improvement with the hope that perhaps you can extract some ideas from them. The first is, in order to be a Renaissance person, your intellect and your mind has to be one of the most important areas of focus. This will mean the first thing you would need is stamina. Now, stamina comes in various forms. I'm not talking about physical stamina or the ability to do a 400-mile race in 10 seconds, no, or 20 seconds, no. I'm talking about staying power. I'm talking about energy. I'm talking about enthusiasm. Stamina is very important. The reason being, as the wise saying goes, the battle is not to the swift. The battle is not to the swift. The battle needs to be fought intelligently. So you don't exhaust or overexert yourself. You need stamina. You need energy. You need enthusiasm. Now the second is work. And work has to do with the ability to persist physically. You need energy, but that energy has to be converted to work. One of my, I guess you could say, both positives and perhaps negatives, was I was always a very hard worker. Work has its positives. It also has its negatives, because you can be working hard, doing things that are not necessary. You have to understand the difference between being effective and being efficient. Effectiveness is what you want. You want to be a smart worker rather than a hard worker. And the idea is to work based on outcomes. Do not work based on your goals. You work based on the results you want to see. Everyone has goals. Every day, people work towards their goals. unfortunately, very few people work towards their outcomes. So the key thing in work is to understand that you're competing with the world. But we all get 24 hours a day. Now there's a saying that all men are born equally, but some work harder during their pre-seasons. 24 hours every day, we all get the same. But it's how you use each hour that counts. And specifically in relation to work, I would recommend the younger you are, the more you should work more hours than your competition. You should outwork your entire team. Personally, I believe between 18 and 35, or let me rephrase, between 18 and 30, you should be working on a daily basis, at least, if you can, between 12 hours and 14 hours every day. Now, those work hours should be split into two parts. There is your professional work, and then there's your private work. The day begins from 6 p.m. The day starts at 6 a.m. So you should be part of the 6 a.m. club. You start work very early, you finish at 6. That's professional work. Your personal work begins from 7. Between 7 up to 9 p.m., that is the time you're investing in your purpose, your passion, your calling, your wealth ideas, your future. Now the first was stamina, the second was work, the third was the passion for learning, the passion for study, the passion for reading. And I am not talking about podcasts and sound bites. And I found, and this is something I learned, some years ago I started to do book reviews, and I found a few people would reach out to me and say, I enjoyed your book review. And I couldn't understand the whole concept. And I would ask, have you read the book? And they would say, well, no, because you summarized the book so well, I didn't deem it necessary to invest my time in reading the book. And I thought to myself, what a shame. Everything has to be microwaved, short and sweet. I don't think that is the attitude or mindset for the future. You need to have a passion for learning, a passion for reading, a passion for research, a passion for teaching, a passion for sharing. But the insatiable appetite for reading was something I developed as an appetite. When I first came across someone who would always be an inspiration in my life. And he said, you should have read, this is me, you should have read 10,000 books by a certain age. And I thought to myself, how is it possible? And then he gave his own story about how he couldn't read and couldn't write, had a passion for learning, started by learning how to read dictionaries, and every day he learned a new word, and he went on a path of study, and he read 10,000 biographies and author biographies. Very, very inspiring. He was a great orator, great speaker, very, very wealthy, very, very kind, a Renaissance man through and through. And so I took that as a goal, and I set myself a goal very early that I would read one book every single day. Now, for those of you who may have listened to some of what I've shared over the past many years, or who have met me in person, the one thing most people say when they meet me is, I don't understand what you do. Because irrespective of the area of conversation, I can engage comfortably on any topic. Obviously, there are limitations, but generally speaking, on most issues that people have an interest in, I can engage with people who are proficient in that area, and therefore I come across as being interesting because I'm interested in their specialties and I'm asking the important questions. Most of that has not come because I'm clever or wise. No, most of that has come because of all the time I spend reading books. And for many years, I read a book every single day. Thousands and thousands of books. Obviously, over the years, I wasn't able to keep up with the one book a day. But I still read perhaps the equivalent of, give or take, maybe 4 books every week. Still a lot. And I try to vary what I read so that I have an understanding about what's going on around me. But you need to have a passion for learning, but more specifically for reading. You have to read. You have to be able to pick up a book. Now, number 5 or number 4. So stamina was the first, work, a passion for learning, and then your personal development and your professional development goals. Your personal development, who do you want to be, where do you want to go, where do you want to, and how do you want to live your life, what kind of life in the future would you love to lead, the people you would like to be associated with. These are all goals. It's part of your personal development journey. It's all about you becoming the right person, a rounded person. Your professional development has to do with work. If you want to be a doctor, if you want to become a surgeon, if you want to become an accountant, how you develop it every single day so that every day you're improving by a small percentage. And that small percentage requires a vision, it requires a purpose, it requires a goal, a strategy, and a tactical approach so that you're moving progressively every single day towards that future. Perhaps this is a good time for me to share something that I heard the first time and I thought, wow. The person in question said, I'm trying to remember his name. He was one of the early mentors of Robert Kiyosaki. He wrote a book called Keys to the Vault. Keys to the Vault. His name escapes me. In any case, he said that he went through a phase of his life and then he met a guru. And the guru said a few things to him, but one of them stuck. He said, his name is Keith Cunningham. If you can research Keith Cunningham, a very, very smart man, a very, 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 very admirable individual. His journey, his story was very, very, very inspiring. But he said, the guru said to him, hell on earth will be to meet the person that you could have been. This is what the guru said to him. Hell on earth would be to meet the person that you could have been. In other words, this is where you are. This is who you could be. And every day you should be striving towards that person. So that at some point in the future, you become that person that you've always wanted to be. So in terms of your intellect, stamina, work, passion for learning, and personal and professional development. Now the second is fairly simple, it's your body. I started my, let me go back, let me restart. In my teenage age, during my teenage phase, I found that I had this insatiable appetite to be around trouble. But there was a problem. And this started from when I was much younger, of school age, but not a teenager. And this carried on throughout my teenage age. During my early school years, I also found that I I had this, I was quite stubborn. I had this burning anger in me. I couldn't direct the anger in anyone's direction. And here was the reason. I was raised by two really remarkable parents. A father who was just a rock star in my mind, a really, really great man. A mother who was amazing, loving, caring, and very nurturing. We were very, very wealthy, spiritually, emotionally. We were raised with the right set of character and traits and value system that has kept most of the family on the straight and narrow. But we were financially challenged. We were economically, we didn't do well. But I grew up knowing a love for my father that I couldn't explain. And from a young age, from 3, 4, we always knew what we had in terms of resources, money in the house. Because my father took each and every one of us into his bedroom and said, "This is a briefcase. This is where I keep the money that I have. Should anything happen to me, should anything happen when I'm away, should anything happen to the family, and you need help, this is where you have to go to. But remember, this is all we have." And so I grew up with this sense of responsibility. When we were hungry, you didn't just go and take money and buy something to satisfy a thirst you had, because you had to think about the family. That was to feed the family. And so as I started to grow into my youthful teenage phase, I realized I had this energy and passion for the natural process of most young men. And I always wanted to get into trouble, but I couldn't get myself to do as much damage as I wanted to. The reason was simple. On one shoulder was the devil saying, "Go ahead and do it. You'll be fine." On the other was an angel saying, "Think about it again. And remember, if you hurt someone, your father will pay for that person's injury and their medical bills from the same money in that briefcase. So you have a choice. You can carry out this emotional outburst and the rest of the family will starve for weeks, or you can find a way to manage and control your emotions." I struggled with that experience for many years. And then eventually I decided, well, two things. I was always around trouble, but never involved in trouble. I'll let you use your imagination. But I realized that I had all this energy that I couldn't exert and transfer to other people. Violently, I should say. So I started martial arts, and I started lifting weights as a way of taking me off the streets and putting my energy and transferring that energy in the right way. So we go back to the point that I'm trying to get at, which is point number 2, which is your body. I always looked at my body in 2 different ways. Firstly, initially, it was simply a lifestyle. I wanted to get off the street. I needed a place to distract me, and so I started lifting weights and I started practicing martial arts. Simply because initially for martial arts, I wanted to be a lethal fighting machine. I wanted to be able to beat up people in a much more impressive way. Interestingly, when I started martial arts, everything changed. I learned about the importance of self-control, self-discipline, managing your emotions, and learning that it's meant to be self-defense. You don't attack, self-defense. And when you defend yourself, you make sure you've walked away a number of times. And so it was completely opposite to what I was believing I was going to get. Similarly, when I started lifting weights, I needed something to do get me up the streets. And as I started working out with people who were very, very big, professional bodybuilders, you know, and they would teach me, they would explain the techniques, the reasons for the techniques, effectively that this is what you have to do and this is why. And so I was around people who were very, very big and muscly, and I enjoy the learning process. I enjoy being around men because these were mostly men. And I started to see their banter, and obviously a lot of times they got into fights, and I would be there and I'd watch the fights and I would see them come together and break bread and laugh. You know, they would lift weights, fight, go out and have something to eat, and come back again and lift weights. And so I started to learn about the manhood concept, that you didn't have to exert all that emotions or go into an outburst. Sometimes you have to learn to control your emotions. And so the whole concept of the body was something that I never thought about until much later. It was simply a lifestyle. I never started lifting weights because I wanted to look good. I started learning how to fight because I thought perhaps I would be a great fighter on the street. Interestingly, I have avoided so many fights on the streets. The point I'm making is that the concept of your body, in terms of being a Renaissance person, requires that you look at your body in two separate categories: functionality and aesthetics. Functionality has to do with combat, it has to do with performance, both bedroom performance and performance in other areas. Functionality has to do with your ability to provide in terms of work, going back to the point I made about energy and the point I made about enthusiasm and stamina. That is function. Your first role as a man is protection, provision, and that applies to anyone around you. Protection, provision. So combat is protection. Provision has to do with your ability to cater and to put food on the table. So your body serves two functions, or can serve two functions. The first has to do with the practical part of what the body is meant to be for. The second is aesthetics. And here in aesthetic, we're referring to various parts. And I'll talk about the different parts of aesthetics that I got involved in. Now, remember, I started training from a very young age. And therefore, I had knowingly or unknowingly forged a physique that was interestingly noticeable, which meant that I had opportunities to go into modeling, being a fitness bodybuilding, going to bodybuilding competitions, competitions that I specifically classic, the classic physique, which deals with, you know, looking at the form of a man and looking at all the various aspects of his muscle symmetry, aesthetics, tone, size, placements, dexterity, etc. And so aesthetics in terms of your body is something to keep in mind. People judge you based on what they see first before they get to know you. We live in a society today that people are saying, just be your authentic self. I would suggest to you to think about the fact that you have 85 years to live, and you will need that body to be in its best form. And therefore, just like a genie coming to you and saying, you get to choose one car for the rest of your life, but once you've chosen that car, that's all you get. The first decision will be to choose the right car. The second decision will be to choose a car that will not easily go out of fashion, a car you can use for 85 years. The third decision will be, how do you maintain that car? The same principle applies with your body. Functionality comes in, aesthetics comes in. You want a body that can serve you. Most people have energy. Most people have the enthusiasm. They lack the body to carry them through and help them make those dreams a reality. So you have to know how to use your body functionally and aesthetically. People judge you based on what they see. And we live in a world where we judge you based on your outwardly appearance before we get to know what's in your heart. So, as a man, you have to be on good form physically. Physically, you have to be on good form. Now, for most of my life, I have never had issues with being out of form. And the first time I ever stopped training was during the pandemic, where everything was closed and it wasn't as easy to maintain a consistent training regime. And obviously it's been an uphill struggle to get back to where we've all been. But the key thing to keep in mind is aesthetics plays a huge part. And aesthetics is important because you need to understand, and perhaps I will do a separate session for men, on how the cycle of the male physique should be thought through. From 18, the way you train should be very different to the way you train when you're 25, when you're 29, when you're 30, when you're 40. And that's not for today's session, but it's important to understand that we go through a life cycle. We're born, we go towards high, usually slow growth, high growth, we become mature, we stagnate, and then we start to die eventually. So 85 years, understanding how you can maximize that body to keep it in its optimum form and shape throughout your life is one of the most important decisions you can make. Because the way you use your body determines whether you have issues with your health, sicknesses, illnesses, infections. Now, I know people who have the heart of gold, but they are always ill. For some reason, the body keeps breaking down. You can achieve so much. As a matter of fact, we know that health is wealth. The one thing you can't buy with money always is good health. Now, you can optimize your health with money, but you cannot buy youth. You cannot buy health. Those who have good health, unfortunately, may not have money, but the one thing they do have is peace. They're not constantly going to the doctors and trying to get help because they've nurtured their body very carefully, very intelligently. So keep in mind, in terms of your body, I would recommend for combat, I've said this in some sessions before, you need to learn how to fight on your feet. You need to learn how to fight on the ground. Generally speaking, there are two ways of fighting. You can fight close, you can fight out. The advantages to both. Generally speaking, my approach is to keep you at a distance. At a distance, I can do light damage. But if we come close, I have no intentions of swinging. We go straight into fighting on the ground because my idea is to get you to the ground and to immobilize you, whether this is through judo, wrestling, jiu-jitsu. All of those are ways of learning how to fight close. Go to the ground. But if you want to fight from a distance, boxing, Shotokan karate or karate, taekwondo, or any other form of martial arts, allows you to keep the enemy at bay and do your damage from a distance. Anyone can knock anyone out when you forget what we call the circle or the zone of risk, which is where you allow someone's hands to be within proximity to your face, to your chin, to your body, to your lungs. You need to keep a distance, learn how to keep a distance. Now, from an aesthetics perspective, it's important to be in good form so that you can get yourself involved in, modeling competitions, bodybuilding competitions, aesthetic competitions, lifestyle competitions. And this is something you should aim to do across your entire life. Now, you can be a model at 18. You can transition to a 20-year-old model, a 25-year-old model, a 30-year-old model, 40-year-old model, a 50. You're just simply modeling for different markets because you've maintained your body in such a way that you're still appealing to people within a specific age group. Yeah. Those are the two parts of the Renaissance journey that I was hoping to talk about today. Now, I hope it's been useful.